Level.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora tātou katoa, e te whare. Mr. Chair, I rise to take a call on behalf of the Māori Party, basically to address our SOP, the Supplementary Order Paper, to amend Supplementary Order Paper number 98. I do so on behalf of my colleague Rahui Kātene, who did much of the work, and I do so also acknowledging the passing of Hawea Verko in my electorate over the weekend. And I'm sure, in the spirit of this particular amendment, he was a very strong advocate for the treaty. And I'm sure, as we talk about this particular discussion today, that I think about his family, I think about his people, I think about him lying at his marae at 2010 April. No reira, kei tako rangatira moe mai. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, it's a huge amount of pride that I stand before the House, knowing that through the efforts of the Māori Party that we will recognise Te Tiriti o Waitangi, specifically Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and specifically set out the ongoing decisions on the Crown, which has an obligation to consult as we move forward in this particular debate. In recognising Te Tiriti o Waitangi, I do so in the knowledge that the treaty was effectively absent from New Zealand legislation for over 135 years. And, well, you'll find out shortly as long as you listen. Kona te mate, o te kore whakarongo. Mr. Chair, in 1975, the Te Tiriti o Waitangi Act effectively incorporated the treaty into...
Point of order, the Honourable
Translation
David.
of that comment, please.
Mr. Chairman, that's the problem. You don't listen.
Yes. All right. It's okay. Okay. Te ora Level.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. In 1975, the Treaty of Waitangi Act effectively incorporated the treaty into...
Point of order, the Honourable David.
Absolutely inappropriate for that member to say to you, Mr. Chairman, that is the point, you do not listen.
No, we've had the member asked for an interpretation. We got the interpretation. I was comfortable with that, and I've asked the member to continue. To Europe. Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
Is the chairman saying that it is appropriate to include the chairman of the debate if it's done in Maori but not in English? Because that's the effect of your ruling.
No, I don't need any help, thank you. I've made a ruling. I want this debate to continue and have it to flow. I'm allowing Te ora Level to continue.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. In 1975, the Treaty of Waitangi Act effectively incorporated the treaty into legislation and delegated a role to the tribunal to determine the meaning of the treaty and treaty principles. Since that time, Parliament has included treaty legislative references and provided some legislative guidance on the treaty's meaning. Mr. Chair, our SOP today provides a key statement, and this is important, and I quote, "In order to recognise and respect the Crown's responsibility to give effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi." I say again that our SOP states, "In order to recognise and respect the Crown's responsibility to give effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi," end of quote. So in doing so, it falls into the category classified by Matthew Palmer as the, quote, "recognise and respect category," reflecting provisions which are often used in the statute to ensure the treaty is treated with the highest level of attention. So, but there is another element to our SOP which leads us on to further discussion, and that is to do with the wording "to give effect." For those in the House with a good knowledge of statute, we will recall, one would be aware that this is found in Section 4 of the Conservation Act. Here it states, quote, "This Act shall be interpreted and administered as to give effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi," end of quote. Mr. Chair, if one was to wander through legislation, we'll see a huge colourful menu of clauses which effectively incorporate the treaty. The Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind state the need to give, quote, "to give particular recognition to the treaty principles." The Resource Management Act asks that we take account of the treaty principles. The Environment Act requires us to ensure full and balanced account of the treaty principles, while the Crown Minerals Act recommends that we have regard for treaty principles. Basically, sir, there is a huge archive of legislative activity in relation to the treaty which has helped to guide the appropriate interpretation of treaty clauses in legislation. So within this context, it's somewhat bizarre to think that some parties still question the need for a treaty clause, or that they are overly concerned about the fact that we are working on the treaty provisions, that we were working on the treaty provisions right up until hours leading up to the announcement yesterday. Mr. Chair, we understand there's a wide spectrum of knowledge around this House about what the treaty means in practice. That's clear from many debates in this House. For the National Party and the Māori Party, the requirement to provide due cognizance of the treaty analysis and interpretation is something that we both value, to the extent that it is one of the first statements in our relationship agreement. Our agreement stipulates that, quote, both the National Party and the Māori, Mr. Chair,
To Euro level.
that the National Party and the Māori Party will act in accordance with the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. It has to be said, Mr. Chair, that it has been a little bit disappointing that the National Party had some difficulty prior to this bill to living up to the clear aspiration to act in accordance with the treaty. And if there is ever an issue that the treaty principles should have been applied to, it would have been the Local Government Tāmaki Makaurau Reorganisation Act. The governance reorganisation of Auckland would have been an entirely appropriate mechanism to enhance treaty responsiveness. It didn't. That certainly brassed us off, but that's another story. But this bill, the Climate Change Response Moderated Emissions Trading Amendment Bill, is a chance to set the record straight, to pursue an honourable course of treaty jurisprudence. Mr. Chair, I want to make it clear that our intention in drafting the treaty clause is to provide for the ongoing engagement of tangata whenua in the scheme, and to ensure that the distinct situation of iwi Māori, including rights and interests under the treaty, are fairly accommodated for in the implementation in the scheme. Mr. Chair, I want to return to the notion of the treaty principles and provide a lesson to all members across the House, including some that might want to listen to this. In case there is any doubt, the Court of Appeal defines these principles as a relationship of fiduciary nature, that reflects a partnership imposing the duty to act responsibly, reasonably, honourably and in good faith. Secondly, the government should make informed decisions. The Crown should remedy past grievances. Active protection of Māori interests by the Crown. The Crown has the right to govern. Māori retain rangatiratanga over their resources and taonga, and all of the rights and privileges of citizenship. And if members are still unsure, they should consult the Waitangi Tribunal, which gives further clarity to the principles as partnership, fiduciary duties, reciprocity, the cession of Māori sovereignty in exchange for the protection of rangatiratanga, leading to the duty to act reasonably, honourably and in good faith. Mutual benefit, leading to the duty to act reasonably, honourably and in good faith. Redress for past grievances, equal status for the treaty parties. The Crown cannot evade its obligations by conferring authority to another body. Active protection of Māori interests by the Crown. Options, the principle of choice. So I've gone on about some of these particular things, but if there's still not enough, there's always the principles proposed by the executive, and they are the government's right to govern, the right of iwi to self-management of their resources, redress for past grievances, equality, all New Zealanders are equal before the law, reasonable cooperation by both parties. So, Mr. Chair, I've gone into a bit of trouble to spell out these legislative references and description of the treaty principles, because it appears that some members in this House are still not aware of the meaning. The truth is, sir, that we have come a long way from 1878 in the Wee Parata versus the Bishop of Wellington case, which suggested that the treaty was a simple nullity because Māori tribes were incapable of performing the basic rights of citizenship. We are in a new, enlightened times which reflect the strength and survival of iwi, who have advanced the debate so significantly about the treaty rights. So the Māori Party is extremely proud to have brought to this debate the crucial significance of the treaty for emissions trading. The treaty clause is about recognising our founding document, and the recognising that the treaty is about joint responsibility and working together. The scheme also relies on regulations for much of its implementation. The treaty clause will ensure iwi and Māori are able to participate in the development of these rules. The amendments we put forward clarify how the rights and interests of iwi under the Treaty of Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, are to be incorporated in this legislation. They provide for consultation with iwi on matters under the Act. And so, in closing, they breathe life into this legislation in terms of enacting the responsibilities of the Crown to incorporate the treaty into legislation. I want to thank my colleague Hekia Porata for her comments earlier with respect to the part played by the Māori Party, and indeed I thank the Minister for working with the Māori Party, and indeed my colleague Rahui Kātene as we've attempted to forward our proposals under, specifically around the treaty clause in the best interests of the nation.